Welcome to the Lost Tracks podcast. I'm Jesse Bass, your host. The Lost Tracks is an archaeological journey through the world of lost and undiscovered music. Today we welcome Josh Cheon to the show. He's a DJ and founder of Dark Entries Records, a San Francisco-based label that's been gifting listeners with grooves from the dark synth underground for over a decade. This is a song called Watching Trees by 11 Pawn. Formed in 1986 by four art school friends in Rochester, New York, their debut LP, Bass Relief, was limited to 500 hand-numbered copies and distributed by the band members themselves. Not long after, the group split, and their LP became somewhat of a legend. This record also happens to be Dark Entries' first release. Not bad for an emerging label.
I want to be in a tree, watching trees, memories of the trees, watching me. I stand alone in the cold of an old train station. It was cold in the snow, wind did blow all along. It's about dreams, oh this feeling, forgotten memory. Oh, this feeling.
Basically, I think I moved to San Francisco. I was living in an SRO in the Mission. I was, selling records from Goodwill, and then I was buying records, all the money I was using to buy new records off eBay. And yeah, I realized, I guess I always was kind of looking in this kind of I guess business, I don't know, or just looking for music, digging up rare, obscure stuff and either selling it or keeping it. This guy came to my SRO to drop off the record because he's like, oh, you live in San Francisco, let's save on shipping. And he's like, you've been buying all this stuff off me, you like this kind of music, you should check out my blog. And I said, yeah, okay. And I was like, I really want to start a record label to get all this stuff, and he's like, oh, well, there's a band that on my that the band member reached out to me on the comments of this blog, and he's looking for a label. I said, what? Oh. And so I listened to the album 11 Pawn, or the MP3s, and I said, this is amazing. And yeah, I just kind of reached out to the band member who had moved to LA from Rochester, and he came up and we hit it off. And he also came to the studio and met George Horn and sat in on the session. And yeah, it was kind of nice to include him.
For Josh, this release was a culmination of years worth of growth, research, and professional development. To understand how he made it to this monumental moment, we first need to travel back in time to his high school days, when he split time between New Jersey and a sleepy Pennsylvania town.
I had older friends. For the most part, I didn't hang out with kids my age as much, so I think I was very lucky because I had a lot of really cool people that were introducing me to stuff that, I might have missed the first time, or I was a few years young to get into. So I was fortunate to have slightly older friends that were kind of feeding me this stuff. I remember listening to Chris and Cozy when I was 15, which, a lot of people don't listen to maybe until they're in their later 20s or even now. It's just kind of interesting when I was able to I don't want to say get a head start, but I was exposed to this music very young through older friends who were really cool. And it definitely resonated with me enough that I, sought out more and more of this stuff and was really researching as much as I could into each label and the artists and the producers and stuff. So
from that point on, it became the soundtrack to his life. With a boombox on his lap, he would play this ethereal and gloomy genre for a car full of friends as they drove through their isolated town. Their destination was a 24-hour Denny's where they would enjoy coffee for as long as the waitstaff would tolerate them. Let me tell you, I could not hold my laughter. All I could think of was the four goth kids from South Park. The similarities here are uncanny, and until I heard it from Josh, I thought that lifestyle was pure satire reserved for the late night slots on Comedy Central's programming. On a more serious note, Josh moved to San Francisco in 2007. Like many gay men before him, he was enamored with the vibrant and inclusive culture of San Francisco. Barely in his 20s, Josh leveraged his music knowledge to build relationships in the city. Unbeknownst to him, these friendships would grow into professional relationships and chart a course for his evolution into a respected DJ and member of the legendary party collective, Honey Sound System.
Coming out San Francisco, I would venture out to see these people when they came to San Francisco. So Optimo or Tim Sweeney, Trevor Jackson. And so I would go to all these, events, and I kept seeing like certain, people over and over again. I said, I just saw that guy like at the Tim Sweeney thing. And one day I was like going to Dolores Park and this guy was like, hey, and like yelled out my, said, hey, I remember you from the Trevor Jackson show. And I said, what? And it turned out to be Robert Yang, Bezier, who was going by Robot Hustle at that time. And he said, come hang out with us. What are you doing? And I said, I'm just going to the park by myself and gonna have, I don't know, whatever, wine or something. And he's like, come. So, we immediately started talking about music and disco and Italo and everything. And we both were on this message board called CBS, Cybernetic Broadcasting System, which now is called IFM. And it's in the Netherlands. And so we were like, wow, we're both robots and let's talk about all this stuff. And he said, you should come DJ my bi-monthly party at Deco Lounge. So he was kind of the first person to invite me to play at his party and, hanging out with him. And then I think we would see Jason at parties, and Jacob was the youngest. I mean, I think he had a fake ID. I don't even think he was old enough to get into the bars at that point, but he was definitely there. He had already started Honey Sound System with Ken Woodard. And so they were doing like parties in the Castro, trying to play like non-circuit music because that's all you could hear back in like 2005. Two of them were going out of town for Thanksgiving. And then Ken was like, you should DJ. And I said, what? He's like, yeah, just bring some records and play this Thanksgiving Black Friday party. And I did. And he's like, okay, you passed. Like you can be part of the group. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, oh, I'm part. I was like the fifth. There was Jason and Robert had already kind of been in the group. It was like all very quick. It was like all within 3 or 4 months of us all kind of gelling together. And then that was it. Once the five of us kind of like started having meetings and being very official and like, building out theme parties and what are we going to do? And we have to, it was always this very important thing of like, we need to present the history of, what came before us, gay party wise, and just literature and art and music. And we were always very conscious about having that be a big part of the events that we were doing. Before it was a weekly party, we were just doing one-off parties. And we were always having like a theme, and it always was based around some historical moment in gay history. Maybe sometimes over people's heads because they just wanted to come and dance. But we were like, no, we're doing this tribute to like, Dancer from the Dance. It's an amazing novel you have to read. And it was nice.
While performing was important to Josh, he always had a larger plan for his future. In 2007, shortly after moving to San Francisco, Josh made a note on his phone: start a reissue label. This note was the seed for Dark Entries, and the very beginning of a journey that would result in hundreds of record releases and the discovery of a treasure trove of never-heard recordings from the legendary Patrick Cowley. For anyone who might not be familiar with him, Patrick was a prolific contributor in the world of disco and post-disco dance music. In the late 1970s, he found success producing for Sylvester on tracks like You Make Me Feel Mighty Real. In 1982, at the top of his career and several chart-topping hits later, Patrick died of what will become known as AIDS. Over the last 10 years, Josh has worked to release album after album of his previously unheard work. Here's a track off of Muscle Up, the second Patrick Cowley compilation released by Dark Entries. It's the demo version of one of Sylvester's most popular songs. This one's called Somebody to Love Tonight.
There's so many factors that played into the label starting. A lot of it was all this obscure 80s music that no one could find, and especially with the advent of like blogs and online, sharing all this music, and we were being inundated every week, every day. Blogs were posting, oh, I found this rare German cassette from 1984, and I was like, what? How are we gonna like make this accessible to or how are we gonna be able to like play this on vinyl? Because I was only playing vinyl at the time, and it's like, even though I was digesting it via MP3s, ironically, and everyone's poo-pooing MP3s, but it's also like it changed the landscape of everything, and it made everything so accessible. That's a different conversation. But another catalyst was definitely Patrick Cowley. We got a call, Honey Sound System got a call in 2007 from John Hedges, who was the co-founder of Megatone Records. Well, that's not true. Patrick Cowley and Marty Buckman founded Megatone Records. When Patrick died, John Hedges stepped in to help Marty, and then when Marty passed, John took over completely and then sold it pretty much. Well, Marty had sold it already to Unidisc, and John kept it going, but it didn't really work. And then, that being said, he held on to a lot of tapes, and so he was retiring to Palm Springs, and he called up all the DJs in San Francisco, and we were the newest collective, so we were the last to be invited over to his house. And historically, we were like, oh, let's take everything. This is an archive. We need to preserve it. So we took every record, whether we wanted it or not. Then there were 2 milk crates of tapes. I don't remember if it was Jacob or Ken, because Jacob might have seen them, and then Ken, who was 10 years older than all of us, he was like, oh, those are reel-to-reels, that has music on it, those are recordings. He said, can we take those? And John said, yeah, I'm just gonna toss them. And those turned out to be the Catholic recordings, which were proto-new wave, proto-post-punk kind of electronic, very Devo-esque, Talking Head sounding songs that Patrick made with Jorge Socaris, his friend and one-time lover, and they recorded an album together as Indoor Life. Anyway, and we said, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do with these recordings? And I remember we had a Honey Sound System party at Club 6, and no one came. And we brought out this DJ from Berlin who works at Hard Wax and runs the label Macro. His name's Finn Johansson. Really sweet. We felt so bad when we had to go to the ATM to pay him, and it still was like, and we're like, here, Ken was like, take this CD, this is unreleased Patrick Cowley music, and he was like, what? And he brought it back to Berlin and was like, oh my gosh, we need to release this. And I remember being so upset with Ken. I was like, no, we need to release it. We need a record label. And he's like, no, we don't have a record label. And I was like, no, I'm starting a record label. And he's like, but it's not ready. And I was like, no, but I'm going to start a record label. And it definitely put some fire under my ass to be like, I need to have a record label. This is ridiculous. We're going to be finding stuff like this, under our noses. And the disconnection also, it was me being such a newly free gay, and then finding this amazing gay music made by 2 gay guys in San Francisco who also came here. Well, Patrick came here to escape, his conservative, town too. He was a teenager, or 21. I don't know. I just was like, we need to keep this. This is a very San Francisco gay story. And for it to be taken by these 2 straight German guys, I just felt like I was so upset. I remember we were really fighting, but Ken saw the business side of it, being oh, they have a very established label, they have a PR team, they have a pressing plant, they have Hard Wax, they have all the connections to make this a more successful thing than me starting a record label just to put out this record.
Despite his feelings on the missed opportunity with Patrick Cowley's Catholic record, Josh and the Honey Sound System held an album release party on the eve of Patrick's 59th birthday. Josh contacted all of Patrick's friends and family he could get a hold of and recorded interviews to be played back during the party. However, it wasn't until the night of the event that Josh received information on Patrick that would alter the course of his life and business forever.
And so they did CDs 2009. We had a release party for the record in San Francisco, and it was huge. And we had videos playing. We had a drag performance of someone doing one of the songs from Catholic. He dressed up as a priest. So good. Jorge came out from New York. He was living in New York at the time. He came out to celebrate. And that's when these two bears came up to me and they asked if I had found his porn soundtracks. And I said, what? No. And I said, I just talked to like 25 of his friends and no one mentioned porn soundtracks. So I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, oh no, he did porn soundtracks. He told us. So I remember going back and I mean, I have it all in my emails being like, reaching out to all these people. Hey, did you know about Patrick's? Did Patrick ever talk about porn soundtracks? And all of his best friend who literally held him like while he was dying was like, no, he didn't do any porn soundtrack. So I was like, okay, these people are definitely like, maybe they're confused with some other guy named Patrick, or I think I just was like, I don't know what they're talking about. So I think there was a blog that I was really obsessed with called BJ Land, run by this guy Brian in New York, and he would always post like clips of vintage porn and do all these like amazing photos of all the Al Parker and all the guys. And one day he posted a clip from School Days with an instrumental version of Sylvester, I Need Somebody to Love Tonight. And he wrote, the DVD software, the freeware that I have only can capture 3 minutes of audio, but I think that there's more music on here that is maybe Patrick Cowley, and this is a demo version. This is not the release version. And I said, oh my gosh, could this be it? And I remember going online, buying the DVD, and then you put the DVD in and it says like music by Patrick Cowley. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, like what? I mean, I still have goosebumps. I was like, wait, really? And then on the back of the DVD is like an address in Santa Monica. And then I called John and he hung up on me. He's like, how'd you get my phone number? And he hung up and I was like, oh no, shit. So I called back again. I was just like, I'm calling about Patrick Cowley, don't hang up. And he was like, Patrick Cowley? Oh, how do you know Patrick Cowley? I love Patrick Cowley. And it just was like, oh my gosh. So I was like, okay, like, I'm curious about this, film and this music. And, we started talking. And I said, do you have the tapes? And he said, oh yeah, they're in storage somewhere in the Valley. And, he was kind of older, and, his nephew came out from Connecticut, I think, to visit, and he made him go and dig through all the plastic totes, and they found the tapes. And he called me. He's like, okay, we found the tapes. Now what? I said, I'm going to come down. And he's like, I don't know about that. I'm still not sure. I don't know you. And we need to meet first. And yeah, I met him. I took him out. God, I want to say it was like In-N-Out or something, like very California. We went for like a burger. And I remember picking him up in this rental car, and he was like, I like the way you drive. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, people around here, they don't drive like this. You're very East Coast. And I said, yeah, I'm from New Jersey. I have a lead foot. I don't give a fuck. I was like, I signal, but I am very aggressive. Yes. But I'm very smart. But anyway, not maybe the most offensive back then. I was also in my 20s. And he's like, okay. He's like, I'll take you to the storage space. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. That was John Coletti. He's still alive, thank God. And yeah, we drove out there, and I didn't know it was going to be so many tapes. I thought it was going to be just one tape. I didn't know that there was going to be School Days, Afternooners, Muscle Up.
You heard it here first. Porn consumption and reckless driving are the keys to any successful business. The songs Josh dug out of storage would eventually be released as compilations under the Dark Entries umbrella. School Days and Muscle Up were the first two albums from the series. Since these discoveries, Josh has unearthed more and more of Cowley's unreleased music. One thing that struck me during our conversation was just how much ephemera for Patrick's life was saved and delivered to Josh nearly 40 years after his death. Before Patrick was a musician, he was a son, brother, and friend. Like so many LGBTQ folks from his generation, Patrick wasn't given the opportunity to live a long life. His legacy was carried on and passed down by the survivors he left behind.
Oh my gosh, he did everything. He did folk music. He, was such a collaborator. He had so many friends, especially a lot of theater friends. A lot of his friends from New York moved out here, and they were all doing this kind of like Cockettes inspired or affiliated, drag performance troops, and he would kind of, provide the soundtracks or the backing tapes for their performances. He would make music. He was taking classes at City College out here, and he started an electronic music lab with two other guys, Art Adcock and Maurice Tanney. And they were, through the university, they were able to play with all of these like British synthesizers, like the Putneys and the Emus, and they were doing all of this like BBC radiophonic kind of like Doctor Who sounding, squeaks and pops, whatever they're called. And this was like 73. And then, they were performing and doing like these long electronic 30-minute pieces of just kind of like, just trying to keep up with the synthesizers in essence. Lots of marijuana. Definitely, so into disco and funk. I think and going to the bathhouses, Patrick was very open about going to bathhouses as much as he could in Soma. There were so many to choose from. There was like openings every week you would go to, and listening to the music, I think, and he wanted to create music for cruising and for these spaces. So he would go back and I think kind of emulate this kind of like slow, heady disco, kind of like sleaze is what they call it. And he would go to the clubs and hand the tapes to the DJ or whatever, and hey, can you play this? And finding his journal, he talks about going to a club and hearing his own song being played while guys are fucking in the back room, which is like, gosh, he was like, I think he was 25, so it was 1975, and that's kind of amazing to be like, oh, I just made this song and now I'm hearing it in this club in San Francisco after only living here for like 4 years. Yeah, and then he got a job at the City Disco, which was in North Beach, which was like everyone was playing there. Grace Jones played there. Sylvester always played there. And that's when he was up in the lighting booth doing the lights, and he gave Sylvester a demo tape of like, he's like, oh, I like your sound, but you need some synthesizers in it. And so it kind of started this friendship between them. And then I think the next time Sylvester played the City, Patrick played with him, because he talks about, going from the lighting booth in 77, then he was on stage with Sylvester in 78 at the City, playing, and he's like, wow, just last year I was in the lighting booth and now I'm on the stage playing. So it kind of was quick. Once he got him at Fantasy Records, they were giving him work, oh, we can use your synth on this record and this and this, and there weren't a lot of people who knew how to control those machines, thinking now it's like everyone can kind of do it at their fingertips. But back then there was a science to it, which Patrick didn't really understand. He just played from ear. He wasn't a trained piano player. He couldn't read music. He played drums. He went to school, after the fact to, play music, but it wasn't something he was like classically trained in. And he wasn't reading the manuals. He was, throwing them out and just kind of like listening, and then kind of he could just mimic stuff very easily. He had a really good ear. Yeah, I learned very quickly that here I am, like this bright-eyed 20-something-year-old gay guy being like, oh my God, tell me about Patrick Cowley. And then within like 10 minutes, we're all crying, because it's like the trauma of that whole generation that got wiped out. It's like, it's so very real. It still is like, I think I learned so quickly that like it's not maybe the most polite thing to just be like, oh, I want to hear all about your memories, Patrick Cowley, because there's so much trauma. Like now I feel like I'm one of those people that just starts like getting emotional. It's like I don't even know Patrick Cowley, but it's like I don't know, I'm also like, I guess, an empath, and I just absorb all that stuff. And it's just, even thinking about it as we're talking about it now and having not even like being part of that generation, it's just as like, I can't imagine like losing your friends every week, especially like at the height of, you know, his career, or who knows, it could have just been the beginning. He could have ascended to, you know, even greater heights. It's just so unfair. And I think hearing all of these stories, you know, I learned very quickly, yeah, like, don't, maybe just like, hey, is today a good day to talk about something that potentially is very heavy? Because sure, there's lots of joy and laughter and there's amazing memories, but there's lots of like darkness and anger, and so much of this is unfair, and he should still be here.
The song you just heard was another of Patrick's, called Before Original Sin. The more Josh spoke about Patrick, the more parallels I saw forming between the two of them. Two gay men, decades apart, who were drawn to San Francisco in search of a rich and authentic life. Josh's work has added tremendously to Patrick's legacy. Behind every release is an unending amount of research and care. Josh labels himself as a custodian of Patrick's music, and while he has an entire vault of material, Josh carefully considers what Patrick himself would have wanted. He approaches Patrick's friends and surviving family for their input ahead of every release. And rest assured, because there's more Patrick Cowley on the way.
I never imagined really any of this. I mean, I'm so grateful to John Hedges for reaching out, and the path, yeah, this whole path of like a new sound system and moving to San Francisco and just taking all these chances, and the synchronicity or serendipity of it all just kind of pointing me in this direction of, you know, preserving Patrick and sharing Patrick and his friends, and who, you know, getting positive feedback from them and his family means more than anything, really, by anyone who says all the reviews I get or press. Having his sister tell me, oh, you know, this is, thank you so much, you know, I don't have anything from my brother. She didn't keep anything, or he didn't give her anything, so she doesn't have really anything. So if I make a t-shirt or an album, and it just, you know, I think it's important for her, because then it's, you know, something she gets to keep, a keepsake, or it's another, you know, song. She never heard any of this music back then. Checking in with his friends and family, I think, is just so important to me, to make sure that, you know, I didn't know him, so I have to always, hey, would Patrick approve of this? Does this artwork look okay? Is this like, I'm always checking in with his friends and people that were like, you know, how does this look? How does this sound? Like, would he be okay with the song being come out? Because, you know, I'm a custodian, you know, I have hours and I have like days worth of Patrick Cowley music that, you know, will never be heard, and for, you know, good reason. He didn't want it probably to be heard, but not everything needs to be heard. And the stuff that I've put out, you know, was it all meant to come out? Probably not, but I have a lot of it. I've gotten green lights from a lot of people that were in the studio or on the tapes, and, you know, so yeah, I think finding all of this very left field, more esoteric, really, you know, different sounding non-disco music, when Patrick Cowley put out such a small amount of work, especially solo work, and it had such a singular sound to it. He was known for this, you know, high energy synthesized disco sound. And then here comes School Days and Muscle Up and Afternooners with this very, you know, heady 15-minute pieces, you know, experimental synth, beautiful soundscapes. People are like, oh, wait, he did this too? Like, yes, it was all being done at the same time. I don't think none of us knew. So I hope that this has shown the depth to Patrick Cowley's music. He wasn't just making disco. He just wasn't just into synthesizer, high energy music for people on speed, essentially. This is kind of like, oh, he also was into music for people on, you know, barbiturates and marijuana. Acid, you know, he definitely did some acid. And yeah, There's more coming. The compilation I did last year, Mailbox, was kind of like in the same style of the 3 porn soundtracks. I'm gonna do 3 compilations of like this kind of like I don't know, music that I found very recently, well, during lockdown. Oh my gosh, 18 more tapes.
Oh my God.
Insane. And these are like probably the highest quality tapes because they're actually like the 12 track like stems for everything. So it's like I've never had Patrick Halley tapes this big. I've only had like small reels. So this is super exciting because it's like really, it sounds so good. I can go in and like we can get all the tracks and isolated and, you know, mix them down to sound the same levels that the mixes I have that he did. I don't know, that's why I think Mailbox sounds so great. We were really fortunate to have like the actual stems, which has never been really the case with any of the other stuff. There's even stems for stuff on School Days, which is exciting. It makes me think like, oh, maybe I can like do another mix down and it would sound better. Part of the charm I think of School Days is the hiss on everything, but you know, me now knowing about tape and different generations and dubs, and to have like the first generation of some of these songs that ended up on School Days is exciting because John Cleddy just had like a dub of a dub, and this is like, oh, these are the actual like studio tracks.
Today, Dark Entries is going strong on its 15th year of operation, working tirelessly to platform more artists, both old and new. Josh maintains the same ambitious and creative spirit he had since day one. Out of curiosity, we asked him about the origins of the name Dark Entries. While his answer was straightforward, I couldn't help but to find a deeper meaning below the surface.
Oh, Dark Entries is like diary entries, or like, you know, you have an entry in a journal or something. So I said, oh, each record is kind of like an entryway into a different kind of, you know, journey.
It's hard to listen to any music from Dark Entries and not feel a sense of Sonder. Behind every release is a real person with a life as vivid and complex as your own. Josh's sensitivity to this fact is what sets him apart. In a lot of ways, Dark Entries extends beyond the parameters of a record label. When we put each release in the context of a diary entry, his catalog of music becomes a study on the human condition, transcribed through the keys of a synthesizer. These are the frequencies at the intersection of technological achievement and real human emotion. We're going to end this show with a song from the quintessential minimal wave band, Solid Space. Made up of 2 teenagers from the UK, together in 1980, they began recording their tape Space Museum in a garden shed. Inspired by the world of Doctor Who, this atmospheric and bizarre space-age masterpiece is considered by many to be one of the greatest minimal wave records ever made. And in 2017, Dark Entries released a remastered version with the supervision of the original band members. A feat that many labels wish to pull off, but couldn't. It's my belief that Josh's personalized and genuine approach were his keys to success for this and every other project he's taken on. Here's track 8 off of Space Museum. It's called 10th Planet.
As we sit in the station, hoping we can go out into the desert, the glaciers and the snow, on another planet, a million miles away. Something stirs in a spaceship, something here to stay. Our other half is missing, it's floating up in space. The people are there looking for another place, and now they've found it, but we were unaware. We didn't know they'd be hostile, we didn't really care. Now they've got our weapons, control. They want to take our hearts and they want to take our souls. Now they're coming for us. Better make an escape. Gotta take some action before it gets too late. See them getting desperate. See their logic fade. See them panic and whisper. See their edges frayed. And now their planet burns out into thin air. We knew we'd kill them anyway. We didn't really care.
As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoy what you've heard, don't forget to like and subscribe and share with your friends. This podcast was co-created and produced by myself and Ryan Farrell. Better preserved than forgotten.